On your Tuesday episode of Locked on Raptors, the Toronto Raptors season has been all that fun, so we're going to have some fun today with someone who is fun. It's Josh Gondelman, the wonderful stand-up comedian, formerly of Desus Mero, Last Week Tonight, and more. And we're going to talk about the Boston Celtics. Yes, he's a Celtics fan, but he's an acceptable Celtics fan. And he's also got 3 shows in Toronto this week. He's a big basketball fan. He's got thoughts about Kyle Lowry and OG Anunoby, and he's got a pep talk for you distressed Raptors fans out there. That's all coming up on today's episode of Locked on Raptors. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked on Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 1317 of Locked on Raptors for Tuesday, January the 10th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 9 seasons on all sorts of various platforms. You can find all my work over on Twitter at WoodleySean. You can follow, subscribe to, rate, and review the podcast for free on your favorite podcast apps. And we are on YouTube every single day as well. Hello, video friends. Please go and subscribe. Hit the big red subscribe button on the Locked on Raptors channel. And you have done a wonderful service to help support the show. Also supporting the show today are our pals at Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com. Promo code Locked On. All right, big, fun, exciting show today. Let's dive in, shall we? We have a pair of wonderful people on the podcast. I teased Josh Gondelman off of the top, but first we're going to get to Katie Heindl, who, of course, is usually here for Whatevs Wednesday, but it's Tuesday because we had to work around Josh's schedule, which is totally fine. Katie, how's it going?
Didn't even mention me at all, man.
I know. Good. Well, it's just the people, you're a part of the fabric of the show, Katie.
That's fair.
Like, I don't mention the buttons on my sweater. They're just part of the sweater. It's not like I need to highlight them. You're just ingrained into it all. Joining us here today is Josh Gondelman, the wonderful stand-up comic. His album People Pleaser is available wherever you get comedy albums that are great. And also, he is in Toronto this weekend for 3 stand-up shows at Comedy Bar on the Danforth. Very exciting. Josh, how are you?
I'm feeling tremendous. I am so excited to come to Toronto this week. I haven't been in forever. You can tell that my enthusiasm is real because I am coming in January. And
yeah,
I didn't
crazy.
Say no. Yeah. I'm
That's
not
like
a fair weather fan of the city.
It's like when they had All-Star Weekend here and ruined the impression of the city for the entire league for at least 25 years when it was minus 40 the whole time.
I consider this my own personal All-Star Weekend. I actually honestly do, because the stand-up scene in Toronto is so good that everyone I get to work with on my shows, they do such a great job at Comedy Bar, just like booking it full of funny, cool people. And every time that I come back, I'm like, man, there's so many great comedians here. The local scene must be really thriving and popping. I'm so psyched.
Do you have any Toronto eats that you are excited to get back to, having not been here for a few years?
Oh my gosh, I just go where people bring me, honestly. And it's true, because I know I have a bunch of friends from having come through a bunch of times and just from the internet. So I just like whatever, like the last time I was in town, a friend took me for Ethiopian food, and then just like great coffee shops. And so I'm just like, so I like can't wait. Very, very thrilled.
Everyone, go get your tickets. There will be a link in the description as well for the 3 shows at Comedy Bar this weekend.
And I think they've since added a show, so there'll be at least 4.
Hey,
potentially up to, I guess, infinity. We could just groundhog it, and I could just stay every day.
Well, you're here, Josh, not only because you're in Toronto this weekend for some shows, but because you're a basketball fan. You are, of course, a Celtics fan, which we're willing to forgive here. I often make the joke that John Corrales, host of Locked on Celtics, is the only acceptable Celtics fan, but I'm willing to throw you into that pile? That sounds harsh,
just
but
toss me in the pile.
Just toss you on the heap of acceptable Celtics fans. I have to ask you, Josh, you're a Celtics fan. The Raptors and Celtics are division rivals, for whatever that matters. My question to you to kind of kick things off here. When I say the words Toronto and basketball, what comes to mind? What word association comes to your head? Like, where are you at with the idea of the Raptors as a team? Do the word association thing.
So I feel like, and I say this with great admiration as a comedian. When I think the highest compliment you can really pay to another comedian is when you go, that joke is so good, it made me mad when I heard it. And I feel that way about a lot of Raptors players. And I'll say that about Raptors emeritus as well. The Celtics played the Bulls last night. DeMar DeRozan, I feel like, just shows up 18 feet from the basket and just rains down 32 1 million points against the Celtics. I hope he recovers from the little quad strain I think that he sustained during the game, or aggravated. Kyle Lowry, I was like, the other teams don't get to have a Marcus Smart. We're supposed to have the Marcus Smart. And then, so those are the Raptors emeritus, obviously. And then it's just similar, just like relentlessness and just the kind of like, come on, like, don't do that. It's not fair. Stop doing that. And so I really have a lot of appreciation. I mean, like, OG Anunoby has become a Boston villain from that 3-pointer he hit in the bubble playoff series over Taco Fall, who I think is now playing overseas. But yeah, it's just like, it feels very division rival, like you put it. Like, sometimes I think teams that play in your division, either you don't line up in the playoffs, or they go through cycles of like, your team's good while their team's bad, their team's good while your team's bad. But I think this is the last few years it's really lined up in like an exciting way. I also, very specifically, this is something I'll take with me forever. When Kawhi Leonard hit the shot over the 76ers,
yes.
I've maybe will never have a better sense of like place for a sporting event that I didn't quite witness, because I was at the Comedy Cellar in New York, has at the time had 3 rooms that basically ran as full-time comedy clubs, and I was on stage in one room, but the door in the back of the room led to the bar of the same venue. So I was on stage and watching the game in the bar, and I came in to do my set, and I heard a sound coming from the bar that I was like, oh, that's not like a regular cheer. It was like a whoa! It was like a roller coaster sound. And I was like, what? I like had to remark on it from the stage because the room through the wall was so loud. And so that is like a very memorable moment for me, even though I didn't see the shot and all the bounces until after I got on stage and watched the replay in the next room.
Like a haunting sound.
It was very, it was like, because we couldn't see it. It was just like, oh, and you're like, oh, we're haunted by a bunch of Sixers fans. What's going on? Oh boy, those ghosts are hard to get rid of. But yeah, it was like a very funny kind of thrilling moment.
I was kind of curious if you think rivalries are forever, because contrary to what Sean just said, I feel like when one team is not playing so well in a season, to put it politely, they're not as much of a threat. They could still be very annoying to play. But the last time the Celtics were here, I watched them so much during their warm-ups, and they looked like the most calm and self-contained team. And I was sort of like, because I feel like those are the teams that you're like, they're going to win the title.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. There's a lot of joking around and like within the group.
Yeah.
But there's also such a focus that it didn't even seem like the Raptors were on their radar, and they were in the Raptors arena.
Right, they were just there. They were just like, we're just here to we're just going to throw the ball around, get some shots up tonight.
We're playing a ghost team.
Yeah. So that's such an interesting question. And I think that the way that rivalries sustain is like the depth of how long, it's like the tenure, it's like putting down a root system. So I think like Celtics Lakers, even when one team is bad, they still really they like get up for that game, as they say, and they really want to win in a special way. In that I think like sometimes rivalries that are more recent or have been dormant for a couple of years without that long tenure don't have the same like intensity to them over time, and it is contingent on like the recent equilibrium between the teams. But I still think so I don't think that this rivalry is such yet that like the regular season jacks up the intensity any extra, but I do think like the quality of games can be really good. And I think the Raptors, even though they're having a down year, are one of those, like, to steal a football phrase, like any given Sunday teams where, like
Right.
you're saying, Katie, like it's not going to be like a pleasant experience where you're like, oh yeah, we'll just kind of like hang in for 3/4 and then they'll roll over and we'll run away with it for the last 18 minutes or, 2.5 quarters, etc.
I want to pick up on the Raptors-Celtics rivalry in a sec, because I kind of feel like we were robbed of like even a better version of that rivalry than we've seen in the past throughout an entire decade, where the Celtics and Raptors took turns getting pasted by LeBron and never really came into contact with one another. We're going to talk about that in just one sec here, get into a little more of the Celtics season. And of course, Josh is going to do one of his patented pep talks for distressed Raptors fans later on. That's coming up. But first, got to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks, who have made daily fantasy sports fun, easy, accessible, and really enjoyable in a way that regular full-season fantasy sports simply just never are. I've retired from full-season fantasy sports this year. It's just not worth the toil and having to set my lineup and forgetting to set my lineup and all of that. Instead, with Prize Picks, you can go any given night, pick 2 to 6 players on an entry, and just predict, are they going to score more or less than the projections that Prize Picks has set out? It's the way it should be, really. You're not competing against some shadow expert with an expert team they put together in a basement somewhere that you can't beat. It's just you against the projections. If you win with all 6 of your picks, you can win up to 25 times the money you put in on any entry, and you can make cross-sport entries as well. So you can have a little hockey action, a little basketball, a little football, whatever you want. It's all there. All sorts of leagues, even NASCAR, tennis, MMA, disc golf, European basketball, all that, and so much more. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They have safe and fast withdrawals, and they're currently operational in over 30 states in Canada and every province except for Ontario as it stands right now. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That means you put in $100, and $100 is just going to appear, poof, into your account. That's wonderful. Don't forget the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100 with Prize Picks. And we continue on here with Josh Gondelman and Katie Heindl on a little light Tuesday edition. The Raptors are playing the Hornets tonight. Didn't feel like we needed to preview that one in all that much depth, and so we're having a way more fun time here today. We were talking before the break about the sort of lost rivalry, the rivalry that never quite came to fruition during the 2010s when the Raptors with Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan were kind of at their peak. The Celtics sort of varied iterations of teams, right? Like the Isaiah Thomas teams giving way to Kyrie Irving, Gordon Hayward, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown on the rise. It felt every year, Josh, like the Raptors and Celtics were going to play for the right to lose to LeBron in the conference finals, and it never quite came together. I'm curious, does that feel to you like a lost opportunity for a little sports hate between the Raptors and Celtics, considering how excellent the bubble series was between the two teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been a really fun occasion to get to have a couple more series, especially because the Celtics at that time kind of had like a mini rivalry with the Wizards, who never really quite got over that hump, even for the privilege of losing to the Cavs. And so like a Celtics Raptors series or a couple during that period would have, I think, been really fun. And we had the Sixers, who I think that's kind of what sustained from that era with the Celtics, right? Or like the late 2010s series against the Sixers and them still being very good.
Is that the series where the confetti went off erroneously? Am I remembering that?
It was the best. I think I'm trying to think about exactly when that was, because it was right before I think it was 18. It was because I have the Celtics scary Terry Rozier with the Scream Mask t-shirt still, and I just can't. I mean, he's been off the team for years, but I can't give it up. And then they put out that t-shirt. I forget who it was, and then immediately after did a second version of the t-shirt where he was surrounded by confetti on the ground. And it's like, that is like excellent spite. Like what a fun moment. And I know we're talking a lot at the expense of the Philadelphia 76ers.
That's more than okay here. It's a safe space for that.
Thank you. It's just circumstantial, but that was like, that kind of thing is so fun to me, of like the confetti went off and then they ended up losing the game, and it's just like to do that on someone else's home court is just, as a Bostonian who thrills in spite, just a real treat.
I love accidents like that.
Isn't it fun?
Though I always feel a little bit for like now that I know them in Toronto, like the game ups people.
Of course.
Because they're like something probably was so weird about like sourcing the confetti or something. It was probably like such a headache for someone for
Absolutely.
weeks, you know?
Yes. And then it's like a call from the higher up of like, when do we do the confetti? And like at what point? Yeah. And
Somebody
so it's
panicked.
like, I truly know this is not, I don't want to get any game ops people in trouble. This isn't about that. But Katie, I feel like this is up your alley of just like any kind of like unexpected surprise in the fabric of a game is like, that's not injurious to like human beings is like such a like, ooh, I didn't know this could even happen.
No, I love that stuff. Whether it's like game ups or like on court kind of reactions you've never seen before.
Yes.
Where like things are so, I'm trying to think, mostly like I guess you'd think that is in bench reactions. And the Celtics have like pretty good bench this season.
Yeah, Malik Fitz.
Yeah,
Malik Fitz, who was the bench reaction guy, I think is no longer with the team. But last year they were like, even the broadcasts were like very keyed in on like what's Malik Fitz doing on the bench.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that why they brought in the rule about celebrating on this? Is it the Malik Fitz rule?
Gosh, who was it? I thought it might have been the Bucks. I thought were like really getting into it as a team. But I like even like a new like the Steph Curry like go to sleep like 3-point thing is like, ooh, that's really cool. And then I saw someone do one that was like kind of weak, and I was like, I like that he's trying. Like, where else do you workshop those other than in games?
I feel like we're also like in need of, I think, some innovation for guys now that they have these rules about like not stepping over the line and the sidelines and stuff. We saw in the last Raptors game, Fred VanVleet was on the bench. Pascal Siakam went up and got fouled and was like laying on the baseline, and Fred VanVleet carefully tiptoed without stepping on the court proper to help him up while on the bench. I feel like the baseline is like untouched ground for chicanery, and I mean, we saw this in Toronto last year where there were no fans as well, like the Raptor causing Devin Booker to have a meltdown.
Oh,
like,
Love
that. That's like a example, I think.
Love that.
Of like an unknown.
It's great.
It also tells you so much about something. Like, unfortunately, it told us something about Devin Booker, which I was like, am I really surprised that he got like so startled? And
the guy who didn't want to be double teamed in practice because it was too hard.
Yeah, but it's like such a good opportunity to see someone's like genuine reaction to something and get an actual sense of like, yeah, it's their character at work, but it's still like, how do they react to something that's going wrong or like a little bit bizarre?
Right. Absolutely. Because you could also see it like there are players who you could see just like staring down the Raptor and then like icing the free throws and just like trying to demoralize the mascot. Like I think that, like if it had been Chris Paul, I could see that rivalry being like much more heated and like less likely for the dinosaur to win such an easy victory.
I think you just described like the fever dream of a Lopez brother, actually.
Right. All the Lopez brothers dream league would play against mascots and might be mascots. Man, and I love that my friend that like jumped the barrier out of basketball. My friend Casey, who I was hanging out with, works in video games, and he was saying he saw the little clip of Robin Lopez mic'd up going, he's acting, he was in West Side Story. And I was like, oh, you don't know the context, which is that they're twin brothers. And he was like, what? Like, he just seen the clip and thought that was really funny. And so like I think, yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about, right? Of these like moments that are like out of context, even just like a delightful, like real human reaction to things, or even like a contrived one that is not contrived, constructed. That's like a fun, exciting thing, is like the kind of thing that like, in addition to the built-in drama of sports and athletics and achievement, it gives like a little texture to the human side of it, as Katie was talking about.
You know what I think is a really good example of that is last season when Jaylen Brown was like walking around staring at his hand.
And then Marcus Smart grabbed his hand.
Went over and like they both ran.
Oh, I love it.
Like took the joke and ran with it, and it was just like something forming so spontaneously in the moment, but like something that I've thought about more. I wrote about this in the last Basketball Feelings too, but just like I feel like when teams are good and playing really well, they're so much more freed up to like have fun.
Yeah.
And you take that for granted. Honestly, you take that for granted when the season becomes, in the Raptors case, this season, like a little bit more of a grind. Like I'm around the team and like nobody's really that keen to make jokes so much right now. And I totally understand why. But like something I think is lost because you don't have such like a nice, spontaneous, kind of joyful reaction to these moments. Like the Fred thing that you mentioned, Sean, like,
Yeah.
that's great. And it's like almost so heartening to see something like that happen again. Like,
it like stands out against the backdrop.
Yeah.
I think it's such a great point, right? I think like, and it's the same. It's like, these are people who are at work doing their jobs. And I think when anyone is at work and things are not like as fluid or prosperous as you might hope or that have been in the past, sometimes you tend to like clench up a little bit, right? And you don't experiment as much, and you just try to like get back to that good place and that good mindset. But you can't always just like fabricate it, but you can't like lead by doing and just wait for the good vibes to like follow from the performance of good vibes. But yeah, like when it is happening, like Celtics early this season, when they were just running away with games and ripping off like 7-game win streak, 5-game win streak, their post-game pressers were like really silly, and they've gotten they're still a little bit, but they were like really, they would interrupt each other's interviews and talk trash about each other, and like it's like very fun to see when a team is like in that whatever flow state or whatever you want to call it, where they feel like they're parts of an organism working harmoniously.
It's truthfully how the Raptors have existed for most of the last 10 years, and it's jarring that it's not the case this year, where it doesn't seem like those little fun flourishes are taking place. I'm curious, Josh, this kind of leads me into where I wanted to go anyway. The idea of like this being, a season where the Celtics just lost the finals. They're obviously trying to climb the mountain once again. Do you feel like there's like extra heft to this season because they lost in the way they did last year, and it's like, oh God, we got to get back there, otherwise it's a failure? Or is it like, oh man, we're awesome, we made the finals, let's be awesome, have a great time with it? Like, I'm curious, like both like your impression of the way the team is dealing with it, and as a fan, like what is the sort of experience of watching a team defend an Eastern Conference championship but not defend a title because they lost in the finals? Can't relate to that up in here in Toronto.
It feels, I feel as a fan, not like I expect a championship or it will be a disappointment, but it feels like getting to that point is right, because you defending an Eastern Conference title is like cool, but it's also, it's so precarious because it's not, it doesn't have that same weight of like, you've done it and then everything is either like adding to the legacy or postscript. Like, I still think all these players feel like it seems like they are still, and some of them are so young that like the narrative on them is still being constantly like wiped away and rewritten. I think sometimes unfairly quickly, and sometimes too aggressively. Like, it was a team that went from like, wow, they've made 4 Eastern Conference finals in 5 years, to like, that doesn't matter until they get to the finals. And now it's like, well, now they've been to the finals, they have to win a finals. And it feels a little unfair, but it's also like, ooh, it does seem like this team would be capable of winning the final. Like, I think the sustained like success and then coming into this period of like, oh, there's this potential for more. It doesn't feel like, oh, hey, this was a fun story. Like the Isaiah Thomas years, it always kind of felt like, yeah, LeBron is going to swat these teams away. But wow, it's so fun to watch him score however many points in the fourth quarter and win this game in an exciting fashion. So yeah, I think that there is, I think that the players do not feel like they're emotionally coasting on the success of last season, but it is interesting to see, because last season, that second half, they were so keyed into every game because they had to be to get the good seeding in the playoffs, even to make the playoffs from where they had started. And this season, it seems like there are a lot more like nail biters. And you can see, I listened to John Corrales after last night's game, and he was saying like, it's good to win these kind of games where like you make a run, they make a run, you make a run, they make a run. And I think that's true. I think he's right. But also it's like, you don't always want to leave yourselves vulnerable to the teams that like you should be closing the door on a little sooner. In my opinion, but like, I don't play the games. I'm glad they won.
We're going to continue on here. I do want to ask your sort of thoughts on the Celtics' actual title odds this season. Are you feeling good? We'll get to that, plus your pep talk for Raptors fans who are going through it this year. We'll get to that in just 1 second. Before we do that, however, got to tell you about our friends over at betonline.net, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis all season long. Maybe you're like me, you're a bit of a casual sports bettor. I usually only throw money down when I'm like at a game itself to enrich the live experience. And usually when I do that, I go in totally unprepared and I lose money as a result. BetOnline is here to make you the informed wager. They've got all the analysis you need, all the info as to why the lines are set the way they are. They've got podcasts, injury reports, everything you might want on all the pro and college sports you want. You've got, of course, the soccer leagues around Europe kicking back up after the World Cup. Maybe you got soccer fever and want to throw some money down over there. BetOnline is going to help you be the informed wagerer in that regard as well. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at TurboTax. Go to TurboTax and don't do your taxes. Meet with an expert who will do them for you. I am a freelance sports media person, which means my taxes every year are a whole nightmare to deal with, and I don't do them anymore. I can't. It's too hard. It's too much work. I don't like admin. TurboTax has people there to help you, so you do not have to do your taxes. Think about the glory of not doing taxes. You can show your eyes things that are not taxes. Think about things that are not taxes. TurboTax is here to help you with that. They have an expert who will do your taxes from start to finish, ensuring your taxes are done right, guaranteed, so you can relax. Feels good to be done with your taxes, doesn't it? Come to TurboTax. Don't do your taxes. Visit TurboTax.com to learn more. Intuit TurboTax, full service products only. Video meeting while expert does your taxes required. See guaranteed details, at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, we are here closing this bad boy out. Katie, did you have anything? We kind of abruptly had to move to break there. I was curious if you had anything to follow up on Josh. We were talking about title expectations, etc., etc. This feels like your wheelhouse, the sort of joy of watching a season. That seems to me the reason basketball feelings exist as a whole.
I would say yes, but I'm also wrangling a really upset dogs. There's people running around in the hallway. So what are the odds George is going to interrupt me? Higher.
That's all right.
Probably higher than... Wait. How do I want to say this? We should learn how betting works.
Yeah.
I do the same thing with ratios where I'm like, higher ratio, good, bad.
As I've always said, Katie, the dog is welcome on the podcast. We are a pro George and Captain podcast. Is it George or Captain who's giving you the trouble?
George.
It's always George.
Captain is just sleeping.
George, what are your thoughts on the Celtics title chances?
Don't ask him.
Then, Josh, I'll ask you that question. Josh, the Celtics are very good, of course. Jason Tatum is, in the conversation for MVP, which, why do we have to have the conversation in January? But, hey, I guess that's what makes the world go around. The takes.
I think Josh, we should start talking about next season's MVP. We should do the avant-garde thing, because this is the earliest I've ever seen it and heard it happening. It started like a full month ago. And like fully saturating the national media. So I think we're starting 2024 MVP odds. We're starting now.
Yeah. I mean, do you care about MVP, Josh? Like, is that something that motivates you as a fan? I don't care about awards at all.
Well, it would be very unexpected to me if I won NBA MVP this season.
Then you might care.
Right.
And they're looking at their new awards, right? It's a whole new.
I do kind of like when it seems to mean something to the player. That's like the one. That's not true. But I do kind of like that when a player cares about an award in a way that doesn't tilt their play into like a fully individualistic style. Like there's the famous Ricky Davis self triple double, right, where he
Hell
threw the ball
yeah.
up to get his own rebound and on the wrong hoop or whatever. And it's like that, I feel like steps beyond the boundaries of it. But like I find it kind of like charming because we want players to care, right? As fans, we want them to care about what happens on the court. So it feels unfair to be like, oh, it's gauche for Joel Embiid to think he should be the MVP. Like, I think it's cool that Joel Embiid thinks he should be the MVP. And I think it's like cool that it means something to players to be like recognized in that way. So I don't care that much specifically, but I do like that the players care because it's not for me, it's for them.
Yeah, I have no problem Joel Embiid caring if he wins MVP. I also find it really funny how much Sixers fans really seem to care that he needs to win the MVP. It's one of the great joys in my life is watching Sixers fans for some reason talk themselves into circles into thinking Nikola Jokic is bad. It's a weird one.
They're both, Katie has written about this a lot, but there are just like so many different exhilarating players and playing so many different exhilarating ways. And it's like, I just love that. It's like such a, like, what a time to be a fan. And the levels of discourse, we're talking about MVP discourse, the discourse about like, is it bad that people are scoring too many 50-point games?
Wild.
It's like, right. It's like, oh, does the cake taste too good? Like, come on, guys. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. It just feels like we're watching these really thrilling things happen in real time. And it's like, but Michael Jordan never did it. So can it be right? And it's like, come on, it's cool. Sorry, I'm steamrolling.
All good.
I'm still worried.
It's all good. If you need to, you can always just like DM me the questions you want me to levy to Josh via you while George
No, I think
goes
like
crazy.
the only thing I have to add is like I've never seen like the MVP stuff is so, and like I think award contention stuff is so funny because like it is always so fitting to the person who's like in contention for it. Like, of course, Embiid is going to talk about how much he deserves it. Whereas like Jokic is kind of like, you have a sense he keeps these awards in some like dusty tack room.
Yeah.
Like, actually probably doesn't even keep it where his horse stuff is because his stuff's more important and he uses it more. You know, it's probably like at his mom's house because she's like, I really want to hang on to these. He's like, okay, you know. Yeah. But like that's also so fitting. Anyway, there's just like there's no wrong way to I think celebrate that.
I think that's beautiful. Well, I mean, again, I think what I love about reading Basketball Feelings and listening to the podcast is that like I really love, and the three of us have tried to do this today of like talking about sports in a way that acknowledges like the humanity of the participants and like the gives them the leeway to be people. And I think that's really like what I don't like when you read that kind of salty or listen to that salty old timer coverage of like, this guy expressed humanity. That's not what we do here. And it's like, that stinks, man. Like, let a person be a person. That's like, they work really hard at this, and like, let them express a feeling or like show some kind of, some kind of reaction to things, because like, this is, again, like, I certainly do that at work.
I think like one rough side effect of that is like to gently shift this back to the Raptors is we're kind of losing. It's been interesting to see how that kind of stuff is not necessarily afforded to a team that's not playing well, or maybe certain players are kind of having bad games that like nobody is basically getting one good game altogether. There's like nothing cohesive about the Raptors this season, it seems like. And in that, there's so much less sympathy I think afforded. And it's been like, I say interesting, but I mostly mean a bummer.
Yeah, depressing, despair filled. Yeah.
The way, I live in New York. I'm from Boston, but I live in New York, and the way that Julius Randle and the Knicks fans kind of turned on one another last season was like, man, that's too bad. Like he had such a great previous season, and that they dipped last year, and I think that's kind of the feeling of like a mutual Toronto and the Raptors, I feel like everybody's like, I wish this were going better. No one's
Yeah.
like, I'm glad this is kind of a slog right now. The players don't feel that way. The fans don't feel that way. And it's like, I think the fans feel like we'll do something about it. And the players feel like, yeah, if we could, we would right now.
Yeah, this entire section of the podcast is for you, Van Vliet hater 69420 in the YouTube comments. Just please take this to heart. Josh, we have reached the point here where, of course, you're known for your pep talks on social media, in your wonderful Substack newsletter, That's Marvelous, in your wonderful former podcast, Make My Day. You're great at making people feel better about their current station. Raptors fans could use some of that right now. It's been grim. It's been strange, uncharted waters for a team that's usually very successful, except for when they're forced to play in Tampa Bay. So I have to ask you, Josh, here, can you please offer a little pep talk to distressed Raptors fans everywhere about maybe why things are not so bad? I'm also going to put in a little royalty-free music underneath to the song here I have is called Feeding the Ducks. That sounds calming, right? Feeding the Ducks time.
Soothing.
Pep talk time. Here we go.
So, Raptors fans, it's my pleasure to address you now because I've been where you are. I've cheered for a team that feels like it is, as Katie said, not quite coalescing into the sum of its parts, and it's frustrating. And you're frustrated, and the players are frustrated. But the good thing about this is that it can turn around. You've seen these players, many of whom are champions, lest we forget, right? And that who have played on an NBA championship team. We've seen them achieve at higher heights, playing together in a more harmonious, collaborative way than maybe has been possible lately. You've got a phenomenal young player who's having kind of a sophomore slump. These things happen, right? It can turn around. And you've seen the accomplishments that these players are capable of together. So it's not that you're watching something with no hope. There is hope on the horizon. Also, I will say, I love, as a Celtics fan, I love the way Raptors fans are like, we will never trade any of our beloved players who are necessary to our team, to our city, to our psyches, because I feel that way too. That's how I feel about the players I cheer for. But I just want to plant the seed that the last time the Raptors traded a beloved Toronto institution, a Raptors institution, you immediately won the NBA championship. So I just want to put it out there that it hurts to let go sometimes, and it hurts to hang on sometimes, but better days are ahead.
Josh, you timed it beautifully. Have you heard Feeding the Ducks before? Because you hit the post perfectly there.
It's on my list, yeah.
Amazing. Josh, that was perfect. A wonderful way to end the show. Unless, Katie, any parting shots for Josh here before we wrap up?
No, I'm so honored to have been on the podcast with the composer of Feeding the Ducks.
It's a great. I can't take credit for composing.
No, it says here by Josh Gondelman. Did you do this in like a fugue state? Congratulations.
I did. I kind of black out and compose royalty-free music. I got to get my drinking under control.
Josh, thank you so much. Anything, obviously we've talked about the stuff to promote, but one more time, where can people find you, all of your wonderful work, and tickets for the shows on the Danforth at Comedy Bar this weekend?
Comedybar.ca. I'll be there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, January 12th through 14th. I'm at Josh Gondelman on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok ? Yeah. And joshgondelman.com for other tour dates, etc. And then That's Marvelous. Substack. joshgondelman.substack.com. It's a weekly pep talk newsletter. And it's been really fun to write. So and thank you so much for having me. So nice to talk with you, Sean and Katie. This has been a real pleasure.
It's been an absolute blast. Katie, speaking of Substack, you probably have a Substack thing to promote. I'm pointing you the wrong way on this.
Yeah. Yeah, you can subscribe to Basketball Feelings. It's also a Substack, but I bought the domain. So if you're too lazy, you can just go to basketballfeelings.com. I also have something. It's an interview I'm kind of very happily surprised and excited for, but it's with the man who made he's making horseshoes, and he recently did a custom collaboration making Luka Doncic's shoes for Dorian Finney-Smith's horse, Stevie. So I found this man, because this, of course, plays to all of my interests, and got in touch. And that story should be on Dime later this week.
I think that's the most Katie shit I've ever heard in my entire life. Can't wait.
Oh, that's awesome.
I also have a Substack newsletter. I rarely ever post at it because I'm really bad at writing and it's too much work, but it's called Post Touches if you want to go check it out. Also, please support the podcast, subscribe, follow, rate, review. Go to YouTube, hit the big red subscribe button. It's very much appreciated. Also, go make your second listen of the day. Locked On Leafs, as the Leafs, unlike the Toronto Raptors, are extremely good. Also, Boston better than them in that league too, which is very upsetting, as always. But go check out our pals Mike and Dave over on Locked On Leafs. With that, we'll round it out. We'll be back tomorrow to break down Raptors Hornets. Until then, bye-bye.